Hi, welcome to Tech Beyond Gender podcast. I'm your host, Meena Satishkumar. Today on our podcast, we're joined by someone who truly embodies both leadership and purpose. With over 25 years of experience across technology, finance, and commercial sectors, Sid Kumar is currently the head of product at Network for Learning Limited, where he's shaping the future of connectivity and cyber safety for schools across New Zealand. He has previously led many large scale transformation projects at Spark New Zealand, managing complex infrastructure and high performing teams. Beyond his professional achievements, Sid is deeply committed to giving back, serving on the board for organizations, and now recently he has volunteered to be a mentor through Tech Beyond Gender as well. Today, he joins us to talk about something equally impactful, that is the art and joy of being a mentor. Thank you, Sid, for making time to have this conversation with us.
Thank you, Meena. Thank you for having me. I think it's a pleasure actually. It's to talk about this, to share about this. It's great. Thanks for that.
I remember when we first had the conversation, when I first invited you for recording the mentor introduction. You were someone who was very enthusiastic and passionate about being a mentor. And that's where the whole conversation came up. And then we decided, oh, we'll have a recording on the art and joy of being a mentor. So, what does it personally mean to you, the art and joy of being a mentor?
Before we go into the art part or the joy part, let me go back to the craft part. Right. To be a mentor, there's a craft first. Before you can say that, okay, I enjoy the art, or I've got the art of mentorship. And part of that is the willingness to learn. What does it mean to be a good mentor? What does it mean to be a mentor actually? And there is a time when you do it a few times, and that's when you start learning. You talk to people. You know, like anything else, this has got the craft. It's not something that anyone can become a mentor. Yes, if they want to try, if they want to learn, yes. But nobody is a born mentor. It's a craft that anyone can learn. Art part is when you bring in the imagination. When you have learned the craft, that's when you move to the art. Okay, what can I change? What do I learn from this? What do I shift? That's where the art part comes into it. You can have any number of frameworks, any number of models that you have. You can use them. They're not going to work always because things change. When you're having a conversation, it doesn't go the way it is described in that. That's where the art comes. Okay, what do I shift? Take any art form. You first learn the craft, then you move into the imagination part. Then it's a joy. Joy is something that you experience when you realize why are you doing the mentoring. When you see that person grow, when you see yourself grow with that relationship, that's when the joy comes. And those joy is not something that you see, okay, you help somebody as a mentor and you see that person grow. It is in that moment when you're having that conversation and when you feel that it has clicked with the person and you, that's when you get the joy. And so that's what I mean by the art and the joy of a mentor.
Yeah, wow. To begin with, I may have been a mentor to few people unconsciously without having a proper, like, sort of mentor mentee relationship. But one thing which really struck to me with your introduction was the word framework that you used. I was like, are there established like frameworks for how you be a mentor?
Um, I've not found one which like coaching. You'll find a lot of coaching frameworks, right? There are many ways to coach. Those frameworks are there. The questioning part, you pick some of that, and then you convert part of that framework. Is what does that mean? One thing that is most important is the mentor-mentee relationship. It's not documented anywhere. if you may have heard the word or the phrase client attorney privilege, in legal terms, there is a mentor mentee privilege. The conversations that happen stay within that. They don't go anywhere. It's a contract. It's a contract between the mentor and mentee, and a mentor must state that contract, that I will honor that relationship and the contract. Because what happens if you see most of the time these mentor-mentee relationships are formed within an organization. You're working in the same organization. People hesitate to talk about few things within the organization because you don't know what will go where. That's the first step you do, is establish that this is the Chatham House rules, or whichever rule you follow. There is a mentor-mentee privilege. One must not ever break that. So that sets the groundwork for it. Then it is also about why. What is there? What is in there for both of us? That's a common framework I go with. Is first is that privilege, and the next is what's in it for us. What effort both of us are going to put in. Sometimes people say, okay, I want to be a mentor, or I want you to mentor me the other way. Mostly it becomes a chat after a few times. You meet, have coffee, and it's a chat. How do you convert that chat into something that is productive? That's where it becomes part of you as a mentor to understand, okay, what effort am I going to put in this? Many a times you just leave it on the mentee that, hey, it's up to them. They will come up with a question. I'll give them advice, and it's done. What do you do when it is turning into a chat? How do you stop it becoming from a chat is also part of being prepared.
Interesting how you began with this framework, saying that it is like a coaching framework that you pick up and then you probably reutilize it for mentoring. Now, what is the difference between coaching someone or mentoring someone? How does a relationship stay between a coach and someone being coached, and a mentor and a mentee?
One big difference, what I've observed, is a coach does not need to be from the same industry, does not need to be from the same background at all, or may have no understanding of your work. It is good to have a mentor who has got some understanding of the work. Depends on if the mentorship is around the work related. Then it makes some sense that when you're having a conversation, especially around in the tech industry, it makes sense in that scenario. That's one I would say is slightly visible. But there is another one. I'll share a screen quickly if I can.
Yeah.
On the x-axis on the left, you've got past, you've got future. On the y-axis, you've got tell and ask.
Mm-hmm.
If let's say if you go here, right? This area.
Mm-hmm.
This is where is the area of a therapist or a counselor. You're in the past. You're asking a lot of questions. If you are more in the either tell, past, future, or rather ask, but more future, this is the coach, right? This is where the coach lives
Mm-hmm.
mostly. You can be a trainer. Trainer could be somewhere around here, and between past and tell is also it could be kind of a training and thing. Mentor lives all over the place.
Okay. So,
It's
yeah, just to our listeners who are probably just listening to the audio version of this,
yeah,
I thought I'd just explain a little bit. So, we are currently looking at a quadrant
yep,
where the x-axis is past in one corner and the future in the other. and then the y-axis is on top, it is still an ask, right? So
Yep.
now, okay, so you're saying that anything that falls in the quadrant between past and ask is what a therapist does, and ask and future is what a coach does,
Yes.
and
And the
then
mentor lives in more future and tell, but not without asking, right? Because if a mentor just keeps on going about telling, then it's wrong. But that's where the outcome that you want is coming from there, and that's where the difference between the coach and the mentor happens. Because mentor, if you look at where does the word mentor originate from, based on my research, it's from a character in Homer's Odyssey. It,
Mhm.
it was named mentor, and the mentor gave the guidance. Mentee came much later, just like employer employee, mentor mentee happened. But that's where the guidance, the wisdom for your future is what you could do, is where that's the space the mentor lives mostly. But
So okay, so you mentioned that the quadrant between ask and future is the coach, right?
yeah,
Now, with a mentor, you are sort of touching on the past. You are expecting them to tell things rather than you asking and probing them to.
see that box which is around everywhere. The ask is there. So if you ask me, does the mentor not ask questions? Of course, that's where you find out what is that you're looking for, where do you want to go. That's the ask part that comes in. But the tell is where you live. You don't leave, like if a coach would leave the leave the coachee to get to the answer. The mentor also does the same, but the conversation becomes quite different because you understand, where the area or the craft that the person is in, and that's where it becomes slightly interesting between a coach and a mentor. Where do you fall? It is not as linear or straightforward that you can say this is what happens, but this is a framework that you can generally believe that you know it is more about providing the guidance and the wisdom.
Okay, cool. Now, I'm just thinking about this mentor mentee. Who's a trainee and what does a trainee do? And how is a trainee different to being a mentor?
um, the trainer, for example, like if you take any whether it's sports training, there's a difference between sports training and mentoring. In sports training, you have got targets, you've got looking at, okay, this is what you're achieving. You're pushing that person to get to that outcome. You're fully involved in that. You're training for an outcome, and that's what it becomes. Whereas in it, if you have a mentor in sports, I am not so sure how does that work. As a coach, you could use the same framework in sports. Like there's a coach,
Yeah.
you've got a sports coach, right? And most of these words have come from the coach part, coach or training. And how we play with these words is entirely up to us.
Mm-hmm.
When it becomes a coach, can the coach, uh, in fact, if you look at most of the sports coach are trainers, whereas
Mm.
leadership coach, leadership training, it's again the same. Most of the leadership coaching, leadership training, these are interchangeable words, mostly how they're used. Where I see the difference is what as a coach, it is usually in a coaching program, a coaching framework, training sessions, you give it and you go. Whereas in a mentor, it's a more informal relationship that is there.
Mm.
I've not heard mentors being paid. Coaches do get paid, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so
you're
that's why
right.
there's a whole coaching industry. You've got an ICF federation where you tell how to coach, etc. Not for mentor. And that's where it becomes the informal nature of the mentoring comes into the picture. I'm happy to help you. I'm not going to receive anything from you in consideration.
Yeah, nice. So, can you take us back to your first experience as being a mentor and what did you learn from it?
Ooh, that was many, many years ago, when I was living in the UK, and I used to be like in technology a master troubleshooter. You got a problem, and you got a needle in a haystack kind of a thing. I would be the one looking for that needle. There was a process, there was a system I would follow, and that's how, when with my team, I would teach them how to do that. And that's when I started enjoying that. Okay, if I'm able to teach this to somebody else and they can pick it up, instead of me telling them this is how you find, this is where you find the solution, rather than help them find the solution, is what was my, I would say, my first step into mentoring. That was most enjoyable because, A, I was not the only one doing it. B, I could see the joy in the people who could find that yes, I can also do it. My early mistake was to tell them where to find, where to look for it. But when I started changing it in a way that, asking them open questions and probing them that what are they not looking, where are they not looking at this, what else could happen, they could come up with the answers themselves.
Nice. So it's like making them to think, the going through the thinking process rather than just giving the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, was there a mentor in your life who shaped how you mentor today?
Today, yes, absolutely. His name is David Havercroft. He has been, part of my journey for a very long time, and I have learned a lot. And Dave, was one of the most approachable person, or it's still most approachable person I know. And, I had a couple of, conversations with him and say, hey, we should catch up. I did it twice, and I didn't follow up. One day, he just saw me and tapped on the shoulder. He said, let's go for lunch. So he took me out for lunch, and we had a conversation. That's how it started. That was like, okay, I was the one holding back. Should I do it? Sure. And then, but after two conversations, he took me aside and let's do it. He shared with me over a period of time so many nuggets, and we would catch up over a wine, over lunch, something. It would be just a very simple catch up that could convert into two or three nuggets that live with me forever. One of them was, what's your story? That is such a powerful question. What's your story? Not your, what do you do? If you start looking back into and crafting that story about yourself, who are you? What do you do? That he helped me through that. Not by telling me what my story is, but asking that question. It took me a year to form that. And then I called him up. Dave, I've got my story. Do you want to hear?
Mhm.
And I told him. Other one was, problem and dilemma, or problem versus fact, right? So if it's something which is, when we start looking at what is a fact, what is a story, that clear distinction, if you can start every conversation, anything that okay, what's the fact here, what's the story, problems can be solved. If it's a fact, ignore it.
Mm.
And that's what has shaped my thinking. That's what has shaped how I mentor today. How do I, even live my life, I would say.
Can we go back again to that second point about fact or a story?
Yeah.
So, if it's a fact, you ignore it, you said.
In case of a problem, when you say problem, like, whether it's work, whether it's anywhere.
Mhm.
Example, we have a bad weather
Mm,
situation today.
mm,
Yeah, it's a fact. You can't change that.
mm,
The problem is we could have flooding, we could have, gutters, or anything around the house. That's something that we can fix. If it's fixable, you go and fix it. Don't worry, don't fret about there's a storm coming. Rather see what is the problem. and because every problem has a solution. Facts don't have a solution.
Mm,
Dilemmas don't have a solution. That's fine. That's happening. That's You can't change that. You cannot do anything about it. You can do, but you can solve a problem.
mm. And your first one about what is your story, that question, right?
Mm.
This is something I recently heard from someone who asked me, "What is your story?"
Mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, there are like several stories that I've created to myself, which was
Yes.
really limiting
Yes.
me rather than empowering me, right? So then when I just took a step back and started looking at those stories, right? They just absolutely had no grounds. It was just absolutely self limiting beliefs. It was just total story,
Yeah.
total BS that I just created for myself.
Yeah.
And the minute you just become aware of it, it's just like you can change your story anytime, right?
That's right.
And then your whole perspective to everything just changes instantly.
Yeah.
So, what impact did it have on you when you changed your story? You mentioned it took you an year to go back to him with your new story, did it?
Yeah. Because see, we used it in a different context. Like, so it was more about um, i- if I have to answer who is Sid,
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective, what stories I want to share, what is that what I want to tell you about, how has it shaped my life, what is my journey through. It was based on that context. But during that, if you can run a CV kind of a thing and say, okay, that's my story, but that's not true. How did It is about the choices you made and why. What were the parts of your life that you want to talk about, that who you are today, what has shaped you to be, is the story. That's
Mm,
the part that you go and refine it and you use it. Okay, this is what I want to share. This is what I want to keep. Like if I have my story on my website, right? And if you go to my about section, it shows how do I think, how do I, how I was as a child. I would take things apart. My love for reading, my love for travel. How do I play with my children on Xbox? That's all part of my story that I would like to share, because these are the things that have shaped me. If
mm,
I can use a word, like I'm a tinkerer. What does that mean? And that's the part of the story that this becomes. That's what has shaped me.
mm,
While during that, you come across your self-limiting beliefs.
mm,
I cannot do this because,
mm,
or I don't want to do this because.
mm,
And that's the one is the filter you start changing, that, okay, that's something that I now am aware of that. And how
mm.
do I share it?
Yeah. So, how was your experience in that year of just self discovering yourself with your story? What impact did it have after a year?
That I was confident that if I'm either doing an introduction anywhere, if I'm writing about it somewhere, or even speaking, I was like, yes, I can tell you who I am without making it up, without thinking that is that me, is that not me. I could confidently say, yeah, this is what has shaped me. This is who am I. You could use that in any form, anything, anywhere. It does not matter. It could be an interview. I've done that in interviews as well. I've used it in introductions, because once you have your story, you can pick and choose. You can decide how you want it. And this is exactly what I do with my mentees as well. And this part of my first couple of interactions, I go, "What's your story? Let's build on your story." They go back into their early days and they talk about, okay, this is what they did, and they craft that and produce that, and they use it anywhere. They said, "Yeah, I love it, because I'm not thinking about many things. Okay, what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do." It just empowers you with, like, this is who am I?
Why is it important to have a story?
Why it is important to have a story? Um, Two reasons, I would say. One is you then get across, or rather, I would say you are then aware of your self-limiting beliefs as well. You start digging into that. Okay, what has shaped me? The more you become aware of you, the more you can shape your answers, decisions, what you do, and how you do it. Because that's where we get stuck. Why I cannot do this? Why I don't want to do this? Then you can relate it back. The other one is a very simple reason that you could be in any situation where you have to either introduce yourself, you can do that. That's a very transactional reason to just have one.
Hmm. Yeah, the story on its own is a topic that really
Yes,
uh, yeah, fascinates me. Yeah, how a story can also display the pattern that you have trained your mind to think
yes,
about, and all the beliefs that you have probably grown up with, or the beliefs that all your recent experiences could dictate, right? Then there's always used to think like, what is a story? Who am I then? Finally, if I didn't have this experience, if it was a little bit different, would my story be different?
yeah,
Mm, yes. Now, so you discussed, right? Like you did mention, showed us a quadrant and you explained that mentoring just fits into a whole lot of different things. Now, do you see mentoring more as a guide, or do you actually see it as someone who can challenge you on different aspects of your life or career? Or is it something entirely different? Do you challenge your mentees?
absolutely. Because that's where the relationship thrives. It is as part of guide at past challenging, and the first step is listening. The A good mentor listens a lot. You would say 80%, 70% of it is listening, and that's the hardest bit. Listening, it's bizarre, that we just cannot listen. Eager to respond, eager to react, but not listen. And that's the first bit that, from a craft point of view, you start understanding how do I actually listen, so that you're absorbing everything that is being said, and then you have a conversation. And it's not about that, you let somebody talk for 20 minutes and then you repeat. Listening does not mean that. You can have a conversation, a dialogue, but still listen. The dialogue is about probing further. It's like a dance, right? So it's conversation listening is like a dance that you take a step, the other person takes a step. But you don't lead. Your first question, like what I do generally, is what's on your mind. That itself starts from there. There's no set agenda. There's nothing. But from there you come to a dance which leads to an outcome where, okay, you at the end of it, you go with 2 or 3 takeaways that you're going to do. And this is where the challenge part comes. During this conversation, you figure out, okay, what is the challenge? What is that belief that is stopping you from taking the next step?
Yeah, that is powerful, right? A lot of the times it is a fear which actually stops us from taking the next step forward. And it's always nice to have someone backing you saying it's all okay, just go ahead and do it and try it.
Yeah.
So, how has mentoring changed you personally or professionally?
Exactly how it does to everyone else. That you question yourself, you ask, okay, do I try? And uh, it, first thing was around looking at what can I do, what I should not do, where do I go with this? Even asking a simple question, getting a different opinion or a view, and having a conversation.
Mm.
keeping that growth in the mind that, okay, where do I take this to? An example would be, for example, if I was working on a strategy piece and I was stuck, you know, sat down with one of my mentors, okay, what do we do here? And that person had no idea about that piece of work or anything. He asked only one simple question: what is the story you want to tell? I had not even thought about that. I was deep in the detail, deep in everywhere. But that's the kind of guidance and wisdom by questioning. You can, like, okay, where do you want to take this to? Where do you want this story as a strategy to be? And that's the power I see in mentoring, because you otherwise just don't get those conversations.
So, have there been any experience where you have given a advice to a mentee and just realized, oh my gosh, that's such a powerful advice that I've just given now? Am I practicing that myself? Have you had any such experience and are you able to share that with us?
Absolutely. Oh, it happens always. Like, because sometimes you would be in that discussion, and you would, because you either know, okay, this is the right thing to do, like, hold on, I've been not doing this. An example which comes to mind was, uh, I was having a conversation with one of my mentees, and it was about um, fitness, uh, and how we could look at fitness as part of, whole person, and how it needs, not hours and hours in the gym, but couple of, let's say 15-20 minutes every day. And we were having this conference, and I was like, whoa, hold on, I have really not been following this myself for last few months. What is stopping me? Why what has changed? Because I used to do that, and it was part of my routine. It doesn't matter, 15-20 minutes of some physical activity every day. And that's when it struck me, Sid, that's, you need to go back and start this. And then we had this common together. We started talking to each other. Are you doing it? Are you doing it? Are you doing it? Are you doing it every day? So we came back on that kind of a path together.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the times as mentors, we underestimate how much we gain from the relationship as well, right?
Yes. A lot,
Yeah.
right? And that's what I enjoy about mentoring, is that it is about challenging my own assumptions as well. It's not just sitting on a pedestal and giving some wisdom or guidance. There you go, and I can do whatever I want. No, that is not. It is about. It's about being there and actually following what you say.
Yeah, very true. From
Well,
your perspective, how can mentoring help create more inclusive workplaces, especially for women and gender diverse professionals?
especially as men, I think there is one part one part that surprises me sometimes is the conversation if you have with male colleagues, and it becomes uh, the general disagreement that there is a discrimination, there is a challenge which an equity part is there. It's amazing that people don't realize that how much there is an imbalance. So the first part is acknowledging that and understanding that there is an imbalance. Let's not uh, say that there's none. The discussion becomes from equity to equality, or everyone's equal, but there is a challenge, and you can only understand it if you've gone through it. Personally, I have not gone through it, like, I'm a man, but I've seen it in my home. Yeah, I've seen it in workplaces. You have to see it, and then you cannot unsee it. That's the first part, there is a challenge. Okay, so now how do you then, once you've accepted it, how do you be an advocate? How do you make sure that there are chances or opportunity that you can actually have to create sometimes? That, what do we do here? Eh, Um, mentoring plays a key role in that. For a female to have a female mentor is one thing, but a female to have a male mentor is slightly different for both of them. And I've had quite a few in my previous teams as well, where I was a mentor to few females in there, and it was a very different experience for me because what they share, what they go through it's unimaginable. You just don't know. You have no idea as a man, and that's when you can make a shift once you know that this is possible.
Are you able to share any of uh, the experiences which some of your female mentees have gone through in workplaces, which really surprised you or shocked you?
One of them is the stereotypes. The standard stereotypes. Women. If you look at any organization, women in technology, you will find them in non-tech roles.
Mm.
That you can't find them. Yes, you'll find them in HR, marketing, but very, very few engineers. How do you make them get from engineering to engineering management or even technology leadership was one of the challenges. And that's when you start creating pathways into management. You start creating pipelines into the organization, into technology. And that's when you can start looking at right from the university graduates, where do we get them into the technology sector and provide that mentoring to move forward? Because what I believe that where mentoring could help is it can break those barriers. It can break those barriers to move forward. We talk about glass ceiling. We talk about ceiling that okay, this is where you can. I think mentoring helps in imagining that there is no ceiling. When
Mm.
you when you create that space where you start talking about that there is no ceiling, it's different. Firstly, you have to imagine there is no ceiling. Is there actually a ceiling? Maybe there is, but what if there is none? Isn't that a self-limiting belief as well that there is a ceiling?
Mm. Yeah, I always wonder if it is nicer for women to have male mentors than female mentors to a lot of the cases because I'm a solution architect and I'm the only female solution architect in my team. And I deal only with male infrastructure teams, security teams constantly. And when it is hard to actually see yourself evolve into a more senior technical role if you don't see people like yourself in those roles, right? And for me, luckily, my husband, I would say he's my mentor too. So he's a solution architect himself. And I probably had a strong influence from him to actually become a solution architect myself. But for those women who don't have that exposure or support from immediate
Yeah.
family, or if they don't see anyone in workplaces, then it is very easy to come to conclusion that, hey, that's probably not a pathway for women, right? But if you have male mentors, probably the mindset could shift.
Yes, absolutely. Because they say, right, if you can't see one, how do you know that you can become one? And this is where if you remove in your mindset is that ceiling that it does not matter. If you are a solution architect and a solution architect can become a CTO, so can you. It doesn't matter whether it's a male or a female because you have broken that barrier.
Yeah, yeah. So similar to women and gender diverse professionals, right? Have you had experiences of migrants having similar issue or other minorities?
Yes. Absolutely, right? Being a migrant myself, like you, I mean, it is one of the hardest bits because where do you start? You don't have New Zealand experience. You know, the standard thing that comes up. I was very, very lucky that when I came in to New Zealand, I transferred from my home company, Tech Mahindra, into New Zealand. So I came with a job. I came with an equivalent role here. So it was much easier. But I've heard stories. I've seen people. It is absolutely, absolutely staggering that how do you not recognize that talent? Because you speak differently, because you've got a different accent, but you've got exactly the same skills, but you don't get through. So, and that's another area. So, there are communities that help getting them into workforce, getting especially in the tech side. I've heard um, the ceiling. Once you're in the workforce, that's the other part. That okay, how do you grow into something? Where do you take your growth path after you've found something as a tech or any good organizational role? Where do you go next? So that's the barrier that again comes into play.
Mm,
Uh, my take on that, like, my wife also have this discussion sometimes, right? Again, there's a lot of ceiling that we build ourselves. These are imaginary ceilings in there that, as a migrant, you can't go up. No, you can. What if you imagine there was no ceiling? Try that.
mm,
It's very easy. It's very easy to blame that, I couldn't get there because I speak differently or I've got a different skin color. It's quite easy. It may be true. I'm not saying it's not. It doesn't happen. It happens. But we go back to again the problem and the fact. The stories that you're making, that's a story right now. So stop believing it. Imagine there is no ceiling. Keep doing what you do best.
mm. Yeah. And just want to go back to what you mentioned about with female mentees, how the gender stereotypes that they experienced was a bit shocking for you. Now, in such situations, as a mentee, have you been effective in sort of creating or pointing them into a career direction where they could progress more easily? Or was it a challenge for yourself to actually see or give them opportunities to grow?
Um, I'm trying to remember. Sometimes, or in one case where I could not help somebody because where she was stuck was primarily to get out of technology but move into completely something different, and not because she didn't want to do technology, but primarily because there was no way that she was willing to take that risk. And it happens, right? Because sometimes there are situations um, where you just have to take a pause and say, do what is right for you. Because whether it's financial, whether it's health, whether it's anything, that's where, as a mentor, you need to decide where do you stop challenging and where that, because ultimately it is your journey, mentee's journey to decide where do you want to take next. You can lay out the path, but the choice is theirs.
Yeah, it is. I'm just thinking it can be like you could just get too involved as
Yes.
well, right, in their story and their journey. And you could just fall into this trap of trying to or wanting to make decisions for them to move forward.
So that you touched a very important point. One of the things about a good mentor is that you don't create a mini me. That's absolutely you don't want to do. You don't want to create a mini me. You're like a sculptor. You're shaping them, but ultimately what it comes out to be is will be up to them. You can only shape some things. You can't be fully involved, as you said. Just when to take that step back. When do you pass that lead to them that this is a choice that where they want to take it from? And it usually happens, especially within the same organizations, that um, when someone's looking for a different role and found a role and they come to you, should I take it? Should I not take it? That's a point where you completely stay away from making a decision for them. You help them make a decision. You decide, they decide what's good for them based on, you ask them questions based on, where do you want, your career to be, based on your previous discussions, what's in, is it just for money? So you can make, help them make that decision, but never make the decision for them that, yeah, go take that role, or no, don't take that role.
Yeah, that could be a huge blunder, right? If you do decide to do something like that.
Yes. And
What?
yeah,
Sorry.
it could be well, right? It could be fine. It may be a very good outcome, but uh, even then, you know, they have to make that choice, not you.
Hmm. So, what are other common mistakes a mentor could make?
Um, because being an expert or being something that very well, you fall into that expert trap, and it's in that quadrant you always live in the tell and future space, which means you're not helping them grow, but you are the one giving the answers. That's one trap. Um, Other one would be not listening. That's a very common one. We forget. I use a very simple tool. It's called wait. It's no framework. It's why am I talking? If that's something that's ingrained, if and you may have noticed it as well, that I would pause after some time, because you cannot comprehend, or you lose attention after 18, 20, 30 seconds of if someone's talking. Nothing more than that. That goes in my head. Why am I talking? So that's one of the part that you stop, you start, you ask a question,
Nice. Yeah, taking those pauses consciously, right?
pauses. Other thing I've noticed is people, in general, are absolutely uncomfortable with silence. If you are with a mentee, how long can you wait? And there's a question to you: how long can you wait without a word being spoken?
I can forever because but
Yes.
I have a background in meditation and everything, but I do understand what you mean. Not everyone is comfortable, right?
No.
Even just few seconds can
Yes.
just make someone feel a bit
Yes.
uncomfortable.
Yes. It is very hard for many people. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Forget minutes. If you have to sit with somebody for 10 minutes without speaking, any one of you speaking a word, that power you only realize after a word is spoken.
Mm.
That's yeah, it becomes so interesting when in that kind of a scenario, because as I said about the mentor-mentee contract, right, there's so many things that are shared. Sometimes you just don't say a word. Let it flow.
Yeah. Now, having this conversation, right? It just makes someone listening to it might think, oh my gosh, being a mentor involves a whole lot of things which I haven't thought about. Can I even be a mentor? To someone like that, what would you say?
Absolutely. If you have got experience and skills, right, and the other part is what kind of a mentor? It, you don't not a life coach, right? You're not doing something which is around. You need to know a lot of things. If it's a technology mentor for a specific space, you need certain skills. But if as you age, as you experience, you can get more depending on your life stage where you are. Absolutely, you have gone through so much, you've learned so much, you can be a mentor to a many different range of people. What stops us? Number one, time. How many times we have heard, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for something, whether it's exercise, whether it's reading, whether it's anything. And I keep going back. It is not about the time. It is about your priorities. If giving back is your priority, if helping others get out of their self-limiting beliefs is your priority, then you will make time. That's the bit. And it doesn't need to be 2 hours, 3 hours a day or in a week. You can do that in 15 minutes. It takes time to get to that where you can have a very, very powerful 15-minute conversation and that unlocks something for a person. And that's the bit we miss. It needs a lot of time, lots of effort. No, it doesn't. It needs
Hmm,
your intention that, yes, I want to do this and why.
nice. So, what is one mindset shift that can transform someone into a great mentor?
One mindset shift. I think getting off that pedestal that this is for me to be there and give that guidance. There's one, I don't know if you know, Jay Krishnamurti. He used to say, the teacher is the taught, and the taught is the teacher. When you get into that mindset that you are there not just to be on that pedestal and give that guidance, but you are there to learn as well, you start becoming a great mentor.
Nice. So, that was such a beautiful conversation that I'm having with you. Really enjoying it. I'm a bit conscious of the time as well. Now, for our listeners, before we end, if you had to summarize mentorship in one sentence, what would it be?
Give it a go and make someone's life much more beautiful.
Awesome.
Hmm.
That's nice. Great. Thank you, Sid. Thanks so much for your time. Any thoughts to our listeners before we end?
I mean, one final thought I'd leave is that look, we we all we are all here on this planet for a very very short time. If you think from time horizon from that, right? It's just tiny speck in this world. We see what's going on. We see whether it's the Gulf, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Russia. We live in this very simple concept of motivation. And we label good, bad, or somebody who is pro one side or the other side. How do we start becoming more neutral? Because if you think deeply, Meena, there are only two parts, two things which motivates people. You do things out of motivation, and whether it's mentoring, whether it's anything else in life, it is either in the pursuit of pleasure or in the avoidance of pain. There is no other motivation at all, ever. If you think about this, anything that you do, it's for either of these two. We need to start thinking that it's from a perspective that what am I doing and why, instead of just labeling everything into a bucket.
Hmm. Great wisdom. Before we end, Sid, thank you so much for spending the time, sharing your experience. So nice to hear from you.
Thank you, Meena. It was my pleasure as well.